a short statement that I'd like to make as we start the new year. Fellow Kenyans, indeed, as our children settle back in school after the December holidays, and as all of our 2019 KCPE candidates report to their respective secondary schools in our second year of 100% transition, I would once again wish to convey my best wishes to all Kenyans for the new year. Fellow Kenyans, I've decided that today I will spell out some of the areas that my administration intends to focus on over the next few months. The primary thrust of that strategy shall be economic. And it's for the reason that the economy is what we want to be a much more important focus than politics. And this is because our practice throughout our history as a country has been one of pursuing the political kingdom as opposed to the economic kingdom. But it is my strong belief that that focus has been wrong. And it is for this reason that we still have remnants of poverty despite years of progress that we have made. Political power, pursued for its own sake, will not make Kenya a great nation. We must therefore use politics to shift the economy and indeed to address the plight of the most vulnerable members of our society. We need to use politics to better the livelihood of our fellow Kenyans. If we use politics as a means to a greater end, we will give politics meaning, and that is my intent for this year. On the first area of focus, and that is to revive our economy so as to increase circulation of money in our economy, clearing bills is indeed a priority. And I'm pleased to note that following my directive in November of 2019, that all verified and genuine pending bills be paid immediately, about 70% of pending bills owed by national and county governments and have been deemed and verified as payable have been paid by the 31st of December. Similarly, with a planned infrastructure bond of 150 billion shillings, all infrastructure-related bills will be settled early this year, and this will go a long way to aid the completion of all ongoing road and infrastructure projects across our country. On this, I indeed appreciate the support that I have received from Parliament in appropriating budgetary resources that made it possible to make these payments. On the issue of removal of the interest rate cap, you will recall that the law capping interests in Kenya came into force in 2016 and set the maximum lending rate at no more than 4 percentage points above the central bank rate. This law was introduced following a public outcry against the high cost of credit. The implementation of the law was expected to lower the cost of credit, but also to increase access to credit. Unfortunately, the law had the opposite effect on the economy and reduced the amount available for credit. The removal, therefore, of the interest rate cap in November last year will facilitate the availability of more credit to businesses, which it will in turn increase the circulation of money And at this point, I urge the Central Bank of Kenya to use the full range of instruments of regulation and policy at its disposal to prevent predatory lending and to ensure that banks can offer loans at affordable interest rates. Removing the constraints to the growth of micro, small, and medium enterprises, this sector is indeed the lifeblood of our economy. The sector accounts for more than 80% of all our businesses in Kenya and creates about 75% of the jobs and are key contributors to broad-based inclusive economic growth. But MSMEs face many challenges which reduce their competitiveness and constrain their growth. And as a result, the combination of MSMEs to the country's gross domestic product is currently only at 30%, a figure that could be much higher if we were to realize their full potential. We are therefore putting in place several measures to restart this powerful engine of our economy, and they include increasing access to affordable credit, measures to ensure and to enable MSMEs to access affordable credit, including the recently launched STAWI, and this will provide unsecured credit to MSMEs which, because of their informal nature and lack of collateral securities, had been locked out of the formal credit market. 5 commercial banks in Kenya have set aside 10 billion shillings to be lent to MSMEs at an interest rate of 9% per annum in loan amounts ranging between 30,000 to 250,000 shillings. Partnership between the government and MSMEs in the construction industry to provide doors and windows for the affordable housing program is another policy program that we intend to follow through on. In line also with one of the recommendations for policy change in the Building Bridges report, Biashara centers will be established across the country to provide a huduma type of one-stop shop to provide business development services under one roof. The first Biashara center is now fully functional at Kariobangi in Nairobi. Fellow Kenyans, my second intent for the year is to increase the money in the pocket of our farmers. And I believe this will be achieved by directing our anti-corruption efforts against those managing the agricultural sector and exploiting their position for illegal gain and trading, sometimes in conflict of interest. I have also therefore directed action to increase the revenue to farmers as opposed to the middlemen and brokers. Today, after a period of lengthy discussion, I want to specifically deliver solutions on those issues that relate to the tea and coffee sector. Kenya remains a leading exporter of black tea, accounting for nearly 20% of total global exports. However, lately, the industry has been experiencing difficulties, particularly with regard to diminished earnings for the farmers. We have therefore decided to take the following actions to address some of these concerns. The first is with regard to pricing policy and mechanisms for smallholder farmers. The key concerns are on low prices for tea, delayed payments, low initial payment by KTDA, and fluctuations in the net income of tea farmers. Smallholder subsector management. With regard to the Kenya Tea Development Agency Limited, we must acknowledge that this organization has delivered a lot of value to farmers in the past. But we must also recognize that there are some operational and governance challenges that have emerged in the last few years. Key amongst these is the conflict of interest by directors and lack of clarity in the declaration of dividends by subsidiary companies. Indeed, it is clear that the governance of KTDA and indeed the entire marketing of tea will require to be restructured if we are to get and to assure our farmers get more revenue from their tea sales. Empirical evidence abounds as a result of poor corporate governance that states that farmers who would be earning about 91 shillings per kilo for their tea are currently earning about 41 shillings, with 50 shillings per kilo going to brokers and middlemen. So today, I have directed the Competition Authority at the National Treasury to take decisive action and conclusive action to bring these practices to an end. I further direct the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Trade to take immediate measures to ensure that each of the subsidiaries has separate governance structures and that the profits from each of the subsidiaries is reflected in farmers' incomes. The next measure relates to direct sales versus auction sales. For the longest time in the history of our tea farming in Kenya, farmers would deliver their tea to tea buying centers from where it was collected for delivery to tea factories. Indeed, in the context of market liberalization, farmers should have the option of selling their tea to whomever they choose. The concern here is that certain people have taken unfortunate advantage of this option to exploit farmers. These middlemen, variously known as Sokohuru on one side or Mukohoro on another, purchase tea from the farmers on a cash-on-delivery basis and then on-sell it to KTDA in their own names. I therefore direct the Ministry of Agriculture to ensure that the Tea Regulations 2019 incorporate appropriate mechanisms to ensure that no one who is not a registered tea grower is allowed to sell it. I further direct the Ministry of Agriculture to immediately explore the option of KTDA paying farmers no less than 50% of their deliveries as monthly payments, with the balance being paid as annual bonus. With regard to value addition, we have noted that in 2018, Kenya exported 476 million kilograms of tea, earning us a total of 140 billion shillings. Sri Lanka, on the other hand, exported 288 million kilograms, which is about 60% of our Kenyan exports. However, they earned an equivalent of about 150 billion shillings for their tea. The higher earnings for lesser tea than ours is largely due to their ability to export close to 50% of their teas in value-added form, compared to us who export 98% of our tea in bulk format. So to earn more value for our tea, there is no question we need to add value to it before exporting it. So going forward, I have directed the National Treasury, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Attorney General to finalize and gazette the newly developed Tea Regulation 2019 within the next 2 weeks. These regulations include establishment of the Green Leaf Pricing Formula Committee to determine the formula for pricing of green leaf. Further, the establishment of a self-sustaining stabilization fund to cushion farmers against price fluctuations and ensure implementation of guaranteed minimum returns. The establishment of the Kenya Tea Council and the regulation of the volumes of tea sold through the auction and through direct sales, direct contracts to be set at 80% and auction at 20%. Fellow Kenyans, the same problems of governance, conflict of interests, and scrupulous buying methods that have bedeviled our tea sector are also very similar to those in the coffee sector. The Coffee Task Force, which I established in 2016, has completed its work, and I am aware that the recommendations have not yet been implemented. So today again I direct the Ministry of Agriculture to immediately implement the task force recommendations. In addition to the above measures for the coffee sector, I have directed the National Treasury to immediately operationalize the 3 billion shilling Cherry Revolving Fund within the next 30 days to cushion farmers from delayed payments and enable them to access finance to meet their daily cash flow requirements while awaiting payments for their produce. My third intent in the next few months is to support producers and makers of the entertainment industry. But before we get to that, my intent first is also to focus on milk, potatoes, rice, and banana producers in the agricultural sector. In the agricultural sector, our farmers have continued to get high milk yields. However, due to the excess supply, they are receiving very low prices for their milk. As a result of these high yields and low prices, we have managed to get a much better and much clearer understanding of the situation. And this situation has been exacerbated by the inclusion of powdered milk which is smuggled into Kenya from outside our East African region. This has caused financial hardship to dairy farmers. As part of my intent and pledge to milk farmers, I have given 3 very practical directives. 1, I have directed the National Treasury to release 500 million shillings to the new KCC to purchase excess milk from farmers and to convert this milk into powder for future use. 2, I have also directed the National Treasury to release a further 575 million shillings to the new KCC for 2 milk plants, one in Nyeri and another in Uhuru, to enhance their processing capacity. In sum, my intent is to boost the milk industry with 1 billion Kenya shillings in the immediate run as a way of supporting their efforts. We have also said that in order To protect our milk producers from illegal imports, I have also directed the National Treasury to impose a 16% VAT tax on all milk products that have originated from outside the EAC, the East African Community, and I have further directed KEBS, Customs, and the DCI to impound any powdered milk or milk products that does not meet our Kenyan standards. With regard to potatoes, banana, and rice farmers, all of these who have been blessed with a bumper harvest as a result of the rains, and because their products are perishable in nature, they suffer immense losses when they cannot sell them on time. As part of my intent and support to producers of perishable goods, again I have issued two very practical directions. I have directed that the National Treasury release 300 million shillings to the Micro and Small Enterprise Authority for the construction of cold storage and processing facilities in Meru, Nyandarua, and Kisii. Two, I have directed that the National Treasury release a further 660 million shillings to the Kenya National Trading Corporation to purchase all the excess rice from Kano Plains in Nyanza and also Moya for onward selling to our disciplined forces, prison services, as well as to our boarding schools. The two regions have experienced bumper harvests and found them with excess rice in their stores. With regard to the entertainment industry, producers in the entertainment industry are also a critical plank of our economy. Kenyans are indeed highly talented, and the music industry is potentially one of the most lucrative in our country. Hundreds, if not thousands, of our young men and women have invested an incredible amount of effort in the industry, but are getting very low returns from their investment. And we must allow their investments to pay off so that many more can follow them into the industry. And I believe that this way we can do exceptionally well. So therefore, following numerous complaints and indeed in-depth discussions with the industry, today I direct the Ministry of ICT to work with stakeholders to resolve the legacy issues that have plagued rights holders for decades in this country. I am pleased to note that already progress has been made and arrangements have been reached between all the key stakeholders. Indeed, the MOU that was signed on the 20th of December last year proposes a range of measures that will ensure genuine right holders are appropriately compensated for their compositions. Regarding content service providers, my intention and intent is to support the sector using multi-pronged approaches. One, the current sector structure, which comprises of content service providers who work with digital platforms such as Skiza and Viusasa, will be eliminated. And this is because they sit outside the collection management organizations. My practical direction on this is to have all right holders register on the National Rights Registry. To receive royalties, content service providers will be required to channel all payments of royalties through a single, centrally managed account at the Kenya Copyright Board. And this will enable oversight by the regulator and ensure that the collection and distribution accounts are easily auditable. The Kenya Copyright Board, with the assistance of the Ministry of ICT, has already reviewed and agreed on the tariffs for 2020. These tariffs are to be gazetted and will form the basis on which compliance will be monitored. So therefore, in this regard, I direct the Ministry of ICT in consultation with the Attorney General's Office to ensure that this new tariff structure is gazetted within the next 30 days. Further, I direct the Ministry to remove conditions requiring digital platforms to only work through licensed content service providers. This will enable musicians to work directly with platforms such as Skiza. I further direct the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, as well as the Ministry of ICT, to ensure that public service vehicles, the hospitality industry, meaning our hotels, as well as all our broadcasters, including yourselves, meet all their obligations in paying the required tariffs. This will be a basic requirement for renewal of any business licenses for broadcasting houses, matatus, hotels, bars, and other such premises. I believe these new measures will see the rise of tariffs collected and will create immense savings on the processes of collecting royalties. It is estimated that the new system will see an increase in collection for our musicians rise from a previous 200 million shillings per year to an estimated 2 billion shillings per year, a tenfold increase that should see our music industry blossom. Fellow Kenyans, my third intention for the next few months is to provide support to Kenyans afflicted by natural disasters such as the recent floods and the ongoing locust invasion. The unusually heavy rains that have hit the country last year resulted in heavy flooding and landslides, which in turn has caused at least 40 fatalities, displacement of families, loss of livestock, and also health risks. Most counties in the coast, Eastern, Northeastern, North Rift, Mount Kenya, Western and Nyanza, amongst others, were severely affected. So my administration, in conjunction with development partners, has mobilized funds, asante sana, has mobilized funds and made available 5.2 billion shillings to provide relief food supplies, undertake a resettlement program for displaced communities, support reconstruction of homes that have been destroyed, address health concerns, and reconstruct critical infrastructure, including water supplies. I am indeed closely monitoring the implementation of this disaster recovery operation to ensure that affected households are able to regain some stability as soon as possible. If you have any concerns about the implementation of the program, I would encourage you to share it with your county administration. Fellow Kenyans, with regard to Kenya's health insurance, I am aware of the proposed changes in the fees and structure of insurance benefits by the NHIF. And given my administration's commitment to providing affordable health care, I am today directing the Ministry of Health to immediately halt the implementation of this proposal to allow for further consultation. My fourth intent, fellow Kenyans, speaks to the issue of corruption. Fellow Kenyans, I want to renew my pledge to you on this fight. I will not turn to the left or right. I will not soft pedal or back pedal, nor be intimidated. I will make no covenants with evildoers, neither will I show mercy to those who rig our markets in order to enrich themselves. As we soldier on in this fight, I today seek the indulgence of our judiciary. And I do so because I strongly believe that no administration in the history of this country has prosecuted corruption cases the way I have done. From ministers to governors, senior government officers, procurement officers, I have been on the front line. And since I respect the principle of separation of powers, I have no power of convicting the accused. We have done our part, and I will continue to do so. Now the judiciary should give us convictions as an indication that we are winning this war. And to that extent, I think it is a shame on our country that we prosecuted a case against drug traffickers in our country and we couldn't get a prosecution. And within a year of them being arraigned in the United States, they have been jailed for no less than 25 years. That is something that our judiciary should come to terms with. That said, I must note that our fight against corruption has given one joyous result, and that is deterrence. Public officers today are now reluctant to engage in corrupt practices because they are indeed afraid. And instead of dealing with corruption after it has happened, our fight against corruption has ensured that we now, today, fight it at source. More must be done, and indeed I direct our National Intelligence Service to undertake a rigorous review of all cartel groupings that have become leeches sucking away at the blood and sweat of hard-working Kenyans. And I want the review to pay particular attention to cartels operating in the public system of budgeting, procurement, regulation, and the illegal rigging of markets. It should also put the agricultural sector under the microscope. And once this review is completed, I further direct that the DCI should take the necessary action, working alongside the Director of Public Prosecutions to confront these cartels with every single instrument available to us. We cannot be a country anymore where those who work hard are robbed of their profit by those who are too lazy to invest and produce. And this is why I am and will continue the fight against corruption to ensure that the fruits of our labor fill every heart with thanksgiving, as indeed stated in our national anthem. I invite all Kenyans to join us, to continue working with us in this most noble effort. Finally, fellow Kenyans, my sixth intent for the next few months is political. We must give ourselves a different political template if we are truly to prosper and not be dragged down every single day by never-ending squabbles. Every so often, I believe, a nation must come together. We in Kenya have done so in Lancaster in the 1960s, leading to the Lancaster Consensus. We did so in the 80s, leading to the removal of Section 2A. We also did the same in 2008. And I believe it is time now also for a new consensus. And this is the aim and objective of the BBI process. In this process of renegotiation, no voice will be wrong, and all must be heard. The process must be inclusive, and it should spell, fellow Kenyans, an end of ethnic majoritarianism, and I believe an end to the winner-take-all politics. Fellow Kenyans, we are on a path, I believe, to end the cycle of election crises, and that is the only way we can win our battle of economic prosperity. And I want to assure all Kenyans, for me, I am not against any single person, but I am for 47 million Kenyans to take the next step forward. I believe that the above actions are just but the beginning, and we will be conversing again in a few months' time. And I want to be held accountable for delivering on the intentions that I have declared. And I want every leader in our country, at every level, to stand and work to make the lives of our people better and indeed much more hopeful. Over the next few months, as I said towards the end of last year, I shall be coming to you with further actions. This work will be carried out by the framework I established last January in 2019 to coordinate and to expedite the implementation of programs and projects with potential to transform the lives of our people. This framework, outlined in the Executive Order Number 1 of 2019, provides a structured one government approach to the implementation of national government programs and is intended to enhance efficiency, speed of delivery, and reduce wastage and leakage of public resources. I am indeed pleased to note that under this framework, major progress has been made in unblocking various constraints to delivery, streamlining processes, and fast-tracking implementations in areas such as cargo logistics, contracting, local content in procurement, and processing of payment for works of goods procured by government. I take this opportunity to thank all those cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, governors, regional and county commissioners, and all administrators, and indeed the private sector and other stakeholders who have worked as a team to deliver on these key milestones. So therefore, going forward, and in line with the strategy I have outlined above, and in order to continue enhancing service delivery and make it more efficient, more focused, and better to the Kenyan people, I intend to make certain changes and reorganize government as follows. I have moved the State Department of Cooperatives from the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade, Enterprise Development and Cooperatives to the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, and renamed them as the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development, the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives, to allow for better management. I have moved the State Department of Youth Affairs from the Ministry of Public Service, Youth, Gender, to the Ministry of ICT and Innovations, and renamed them as the ministries as the Ministry of Public Service and Gender, and the ICT as the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs. I have also made the following nomination for consideration by the National Assembly. 1, the Honorable Mutahi Kagwe as Cabinet Secretary for Health. Ms. Betty Maina as the Cabinet Secretary for Industrialization. Ambassador John Weru as the Principal Secretary for Trade. Dr. Joan Ouma as the Principal Secretary for Vocational and Technical Training. Ms. Mary Kimonye as the Principal Secretary for Public Service. Ambassador Simon Nabukwesi as the Principal Secretary for University Education and Research. Mr. Solomon Kitungu, Principal Secretary for Transport. Mr. Enoch Mumanyi Onyango as the Principal Secretary for Physical Planning. I have also today reassigned duties of Cabinet Secretaries and Principal Secretaries as follows. 1. Ambassador Rachel A. Omamo as the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs. Ms. Cicely K. Kariuki as the Cabinet Secretary for Water, Sanitation and Irrigation. The Honorable Peter Munya as the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives. Ambassador Dr. Monica K. Juma as the Cabinet Secretary for Defense. Mr. Simon K. Chelugui, the Cabinet Secretary for Labor. The Honorable Ambassador Ukur K. Yatani, the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury and Planning. Mr. Joe Okudo, the Principal Secretary for Sports. Dr. Chris Kipto, the Principal Secretary for Environment and Forestry. Dr. Kevin Desai, the Principal Secretary for East African Community. Dr. Margaret W. Mwakima, Principal Secretary for Regional Development. Ms. Esther J. Koimet, Principal Secretary for Broadcasting and Telecommunications. Mr. Peter Kaberia, the Principal Secretary for Mining. Ms. Safina Kwekwe, Principal Secretary for Tourism. Professor Coletta A. Suda, Principal Secretary for Gender. Finally, fellow Kenyans, I have made appointments of the following as Chief Administrative Secretaries. Hussein Dado, the Chief Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government. Patrick Olentutu, Chief Administrative Secretary for Labor and Social Protection. Andrew Timur, Chief Administrative Secretary for Water, Sanitation and Irrigation. Abdul Bahari, Chief Administrative Secretary for Devolution and ASAL. Lawrence Karanja, Chief Administrative Secretary for Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development. Peter Odoyo, Chief Administrative Secretary for Defense. Maureen Magoma Mbaka, Chief Administrative Secretary for ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs. Winnie Gushu, Chief Administrative Secretary, the State Law Office. Wavinya Ndeti, Chief Administrative Secretary for Transport. Zakaria Kinuthia Mugure, Chief Administrative Secretary for Education. Mumina Bonaya, Chief Administrative Secretary for Education. Lina Chebi Kelimo, Chief Administrative Secretary for Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives. Ann Mukami Nyaga, Chief Administrative Secretary for Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives. Mercy Mwangangi, Chief Administrative Secretary for Health. And finally, Nadia Ahmed Abdallah, Chief Administrative Secretary for ICT, Innovation, and Youth Affairs. I would want Kenyans to note that 7 of these appointments to the position of Chief Administrative Secretary are young Kenyans, some below the age of 30. These Chief Administrative Secretaries, I hope, will work and indeed understudy their more experienced colleagues in government with the aim of readying themselves to assume senior leadership positions in the near future. I expect that these young trainee ministers, so to speak, will be a model to all their fellow young people and also instill, preach the high ideals of patriotism, excellence in public service, and most importantly, integrity. I congratulate each and every one of them for this appointment, and indeed, I look forward to working with all of them. Fellow Kenyans, as I conclude, let us all stay focused. Let us stop and end meaningless speculation. There is a lot of work that needs to be done. Let us all be guardians of our country's heritage and splendor. And let us love each other and love our country. Asante sana, and God bless you all. Shukran.
Your Excellency, with your permission, the media will ask you a few questions, sir. Wasikie tu sauti yako kidogo, sir. Let's have the first question. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, good morning. My name is Francis Gashuri from Citizen TV.
Habari yako.
Salama sana and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you.
Yeah. Interesting observations you've made on agriculture. However, I've not heard you speak about the sugar sector. And also the question on milk. The 500 million shillings that you've released, at what prices will the farmers sell their produce? Because their main complaint has been the pricing of that milk. And then secondly, the 16% VAT on milk imports. If you say it's about the East African region, what about allegations of milk coming from elsewhere, being processed in the East African community and finding its way into the country? And lastly, from the cabinet changes that you've mentioned,
otherwise I'll forget the first one.
The last one, the very last one. Yeah. From the cabinet changes that I hear you mention, I've not had Mwangi Kunjuri and Aden Mohammed. Can we conclude that they have exited the cabinet? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I remember all of them. The first one was...
the one on milk?
No, there was another one before that one.
Sugar.
Oh, sugar. The reason we have not mentioned sugar is not that it is not an important part, but as you know, we have set up the Sugar Task Force, and it is indeed my hope that within the next week or so, we shall be meeting with the task force that you know is chaired by Governor Oparanya, and there is also the task force on maize that is chaired by the Governor of Uasin Gishu, and I think whatever we shall be proposing shall be based on us receiving those reports and deliberating so that we can then inform the country. With regard to milk, government does not set prices. What we are doing is making these interventions in the hope of dealing with the glut. And it is our hope that KCC, or through KCC, we will be in a process of being able to buy in a lot more milk and increase the demand, thereby hopefully, which is our intention, see a price increase. That is why we have also taken action to say that since Kenyan milk is charged VAT when it goes across our borders, we will also impose a VAT in order to create fair play and so that we have equal competition. As for milk that comes from outside the country, I think I was very clear that we have done a lot of work in ensuring that that milk is kept out. And I think if you heard in my statement, I specifically referred to the work that the DCI and other agencies are doing to seize all this illegal milk that is coming from outside the system. I think that was in my statement. I was quite clear on that. Yes. Then the last one was, no, the ones I haven't mentioned are because they're either in place. If they're not in place, then, yeah, so be it. Kenya moves on. Next question.
Next question, please.
Mr. President, my name is Kevin Mutai from NTV here in Mombasa. I have a question concerning the blue economy. This has been your pilot project. And
Which?
The blue economy.
Yes.
What is your position on the matter in moving forward? And then again, on the issue of the pending bills, they're still growing going on the businesses, and of course again banks are demanding the payments back because of the issue of delayed pending bills. What's your position on that as well?
Let me understand.
The blue economy is just
With regard to the blue economy, we are still very focused on that, and I think there are a number of initiatives that we have already started, especially along the coastal belt. We have also in deep negotiation, and hopefully we'll finalize, the issue of how we wanted our sailors to be taken up, and we have already a huge number have gone, and we want to train even more. Port of Kisumu, of which we are rehabilitating, and hopefully again in a few weeks' time we shall be down there officially launching the newly restructured, rebuilt Kisumu port. We are hoping to also focus ourselves on developing all these fishing ports along our coastline. So these are some of the activities that are there, and I think you'll be hearing a little bit more about them going forward. What was the last question?
The question on the pending bills.
Pending bills, like I said, I think we have made good progress. There are still a good number that I said 80% that were cleared, that 80% of what we had said have already been cleared, the ones that were verifiable. And the rest have been put to a pending bills closing committee for them to be verified in order for them ultimately to be paid. Because it is one thing to say we pay them, but we must also make sure that we are paying for goods and services that were actually delivered. We can't just say we are paying without verifying. So all the ones that have been verified, 80% of those have been paid, and the balance we hope to clear within a very short period of time. And I want to thank even county governments that have come up and are now focusing themselves on paying those bills. But the ones that are being verified, the ones that need verification, have been put to a pending bills closing committee, and that committee then will verify, and once verified, those then will be eligible for payment.
We'll take the last question, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Apollo K24 Television.
Yes, Apollo.
You've been a major proponent of an improved business environment,
yes,
and also fighting for SMEs. But now traders are arguing you're hurting them with the imposition of the turnover tax or the patriotism tax. What's your take?
At the end of the day, the objective here is got nothing to do with hurting anybody. Yeah? We just want to ensure that every Kenyan is a taxpayer. And this is the system that is not just here in Kenya. It is in most parts of the country, and it has been deemed as the fairest way of ensuring that every single Kenyan participates and pays their share. And I believe what the ministry and KRA has done is to say, well, let's have this imposition, because at 3% we're saying that for every 1,000 bob, for example, you pay 15 bob. All right? And we get rid of all the other small taxes that people were paying before, have a straightforward tax, and look for a way of simplifying it so you can even pay, every day, and then be free of your obligations and not necessarily have people coming, where is your ITR machine, where is this, where is this? So I am strongly of the belief that we will continue to engage, because these are our people. We don't want and we don't intend to harm them. But I believe that as we continue to engage, if we need to change here a little bit there, we will do it through a process of engagement. But ultimately, we are trying to simplify the payment of tax, which then should actually be much more facilitative to especially our small traders. So I think the point is that need for engagement, And if indeed we do reach to a stage where we feel that we need to change, we will do it. As I've always said, I am a president who is most open to hear opinions, to hear, if we think we need to change it, tutaongea na tutakubaliana na tutasema, okay, tuende namna hii. So mine is just to assure you that it is not supposed to be punitive. It is actually supposed, or the intention was to simplify, payment of taxes to especially our small traders.
Okay, sir. Sophia Ramona from KTN News. You've touched on the BBI, and you are hailed and applauded by Kenyans across the world for closing ranks with former Prime Minister Raila Odinga when you shook hands, and that's where the BBI was born. But following then, it appears a different new battleground has been opened. So on one hand, you talk about unifying the country and what this is what it's about, but on the other hand, in your own administration, those divisions are beginning to grow, and it's no secret anymore.
I find that to be quite unfortunate, because as far as I'm concerned, I see no division. I have made it very clear from day one, my whole objective in the remaining part of my term is to unify Kenyans. I find it unfortunate that in the process of unifying Kenyans, people feel like they're being left out. And that is why I even said in my statement today, let us use this opportunity to talk with each other, not at each other. Let us not allow competitive politics, which is always what ruins our country, right, to get in the way of dealing with real issues that Kenyans are concerned about. This BBI is not about creating a position for this person. I don't know what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we have better governance? How do we deal with corruption in our country? How do we deal with youth unemployment? How do we deal with creating a feeling of equity and fairness so that after every election, we don't have to fight each other. We can all be winners after an election. Why don't we look at those things that are positive for our country instead of always focusing ourselves on the competitive aspect? If I go this way, will I win, will I lose? Kenyans are not interested in that. Kenyans are interested in their prosperity, and that is where I am. So therefore, I am not for anybody, as I said in my statement. I am not against anybody. I am for 47 million Kenyans, and it is my hope that all political leaders will start to focus and say, let's work together. Let's get this thing going. Let's make Kenya a better country. Next question.
Mr. President, briefly,
you asked your question.
Next one. Whether you're seeking term extension.
Nyinyi ndio mnaongea. Mimi nilisema yangu na nikamaliza. Endelee kuongea.
Good morning, His Excellency. My question is on, my name is Purity Musel from the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation.
Yes, Purity.
My question is on the youth and unemployment. I do understand that it's now not anymore in the gender affairs, it's on the Minister of ICT. But during your 2013 and 17 campaigns, you were very adamant and promising job opportunities to young people out here, about 1 million. But that promise seems to be yet
I think this is why you have seen that move to ICT, because I believe that is where the future is. I believe that's where the jobs, are. And by putting the two together, I believe we can be much more focused in terms of dealing with this huge problem of ICT, because it is under there that we're doing all these constituency ICT hubs, which we hope now will be able to give opportunity for our young people, to get online work and things like that. So I think there is a good marriage between ICT, where I believe the future lies in terms of job prospects, together with youth, where we are trying to deal with this huge unemployment problem. Kwa hayo machache na mengi nasema Mungu awabariki, Mungu awalinde.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Asante sana, Your Excellency.